Welcome. My name is Jacob Miller, and I'll be walking you through during this short video series on some key concepts from the book Leading Organizations. And I've made this for the purpose of incorporating it in some of my strategy courses, as well as some of my consulting engagements. Leading Organizations it's a fantastic book, primarily because it blends these concepts from both leadership and strategy seamlessly together. And it does so in a way that is very concise, but also complete. It starts pointing you in the right direction and asks you the right questions so that you can think through the problems and apply the frameworks and lead your organization where it needs to go. And it does this through both leadership and strategy. Now, the first chapter is on how you can attract and retain the right talent, the right people. So let's dive in. Our first topic is going to be job complexity. Now, job complexity has continued to increase over time over a variety of different dimensions. In order to understand this, let's walk through a couple examples. First of all, let's think about product complexity. Think about your phone. How has your phone changed over the last 15 years? Or look around your living room, or look at your car. These products have become increasingly complex as they strive to become better and better quality products, and also many times at a much lower price. Now think about service. Think about your bank. So the bank is providing a service for you. Well, compare 20 years ago to today. How does a bank deliver quality service today? Well, they need an app that works amazingly well. They need a website that's responsive, that's intuitive, that the users feel that they understand exactly what's going on and they're not feeling overwhelmed. You also have, say, the tellers for those physical locations. And so you have all of these different channels, whether it's email, text, and you need to manage the relationship and meet the expectations of the customer and provide this quality all within reasonable costs. And so because of this, what you see is that certain jobs have become increasingly specialized over time. In fact, the vast majority of jobs have become increasingly specialized. We need to become better and better within our niche. And so this is partially due to increased competition as well. Now, the world's under increased competition because of globalization, but you also have a few other points that are going on, one of which is winner-take-all markets. And it's that what people have realized is that the number one corporation in the space is sucking up all of the profits. Think Apple with iPhones, or social media with one or two companies at any given time generates most of the profitability within social media space. And so some people think, well, I don't want to compete on differentiation. I want to compete on cost. And so maybe this complexity and productivity doesn't apply to me. Well, even if you're competing on cost, you need to be really, really good at it. Think about Walmart. Do you think Walmart has mediocre pricing managers? No, they do not. They have pricing managers who are very, very good at their jobs. They need to be for Walmart to succeed. A related issue to this is from labor economics and also from development economics, what we call O-ring models. And O-ring models relates to, say, the Space Shuttle Challenger. So the Space Shuttle Challenger it was a tragedy. It blew up, and those on board died. And this occurred because of the failure of an O-ring seal, these small O-ring seals. And because it was too cold that day, and because of the design of the spacecraft, you have this craft worth hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, along with the astronauts on board, everything going up in flames because of a very small mistake. And you see that in corporations today. You see if one part of your organization fails, it can potentially destroy the value of the entire organization. And so from the organization's perspective, they need to understand who they need to be a high performer to sustain their business, and they also need to understand the demand and supply of these high performers. And so what if this doesn't happen? Well, disaster. If the productivity doesn't match the complexity of the jobs that need to happen, what you'll see is disaster, whether it's rockets or retailers. And one of the examples that's quoted in the book that's from McKinsey and Company is that if you compare a low complexity job with a very high complexity job. Now, take a low complexity job. You're on an assembly line, or say you're picking orders in a warehouse. If you take someone who's great at picking orders in a warehouse versus someone who's average, well, take someone who's great at picking orders, maybe they can go 50% faster than someone who's average. Well, that'd be great. That's fantastic. Well, what about if you get something more and more complex, low complexity, medium complexity, high complexity? Or what if you have, say, data scientists that are working on a highly complex project with a lot of the value of the company that's on the line? Well, one person who's a high performer essentially does the same amount of work as 9 other people. And that's primarily due to this quality, this O-ring model aspect, that it needs to be right, it needs to be done correctly in order to drive the value in the organization. And so having the right people in your organization can drive that value. Now that you understand the importance of having the right people in your organization at those critical roles, identifying those critical roles and fulfilling those critical roles with the right people who are highly productive, now what can you do about it? Well, understand the talent management flow. And here's fundamentally the flow. You need to recruit highly talented people. You develop them quickly and effectively. And then you need to know if they're performing well or not. Are they truly high performers? Are they average, or are they low? Once you know, you can then retain your high performers and then quickly remove your low performers. And thinking through this flow, this cycle, and understanding that it's like a funnel. This is a process that's flowing through your organization. And whether you know or purposefully do this or not purposefully do this, this is happening. If you're not recruiting highly talented people or not developing them quickly and effectively, if you don't know how to perform, if you fail at any one of these steps along the way, fundamentally you won't be able to attract and retain the highly talented people you need for your organization to succeed and thrive. And so one question to think about: how do you believe your current and past organizations have performed at each one of these steps? So each one of these steps is critical. How has your organization performed in recruiting highly talented people, or perhaps retaining high performers once they understand who it is? And now think about, how would others at your organization rate these abilities? Maybe you think things are going great, but if you were to ask your direct reports, how would they rate this if they were to be asked honestly? And one of the numbers cited is that if you ask Fortune 500 executives, how do they think their organization is performing in these steps? Well, they don't think that they're performing well. Which is also a bit of good news, because if you can figure out how to go through this flow and perform effectively at each step of the process, that you can seamlessly flow through this process and understand who your top performers are and retain them for those key positions, you'll succeed and you'll be far above the curve compared to other organizations. So where to begin? First, you need to understand what roles are critical to the success of your organization. So many of these roles, who is most critical in your organization? If you were to sit down and start writing this on a piece of paper, which pieces, what roles, what job titles, if those people failed, that it could jeopardize the value of your organization. And once again, this is focusing on roles, not people. Now, occasionally people you'll start to think of people. Well, that one person is critical and they're really important because they do all of these different things. Take a step back and think about, just think about the role that they're taking instead. And some of these roles might be very visible. Maybe sales might be critical to your organization. While other organizations, it might be other roles, say information security. So think carefully about these hidden roles and some of the more visible ones. And then you'll need to understand the current demand and supply. Is it going to be increasingly difficult to find the best performers in these positions? Or is there an abundance of people available? How are you going to attract that key talent? Where do these people live? And then also, it's not just understanding today, it's understanding five years down the road. How are we going to plan for this? And once you understand the current demand and supply and the future demand and supply, then you can start planning and implementing what you need to in order to understand these individuals. What you can do, it's not sufficient anymore to just do customer segmentation and understand the customer. You need to understand the employee. We need to do employee segmentation, understand what drives these individuals that potentially occupy these roles. What do they care about? What do they want? Once you understand what your employees want, what these key employees want that drive the value of your organization, you can create an employee value proposition. Think of this as differentiation for your employees rather than just your customers. And there are a lot of employee value proposition frameworks that exist, but I really like the one that's used in Leading Organizations, the book, partially because it's outcome neutral, that you could have an employee value proposition that looks good on paper, but you could actually attract the wrong employees, which is why the previous step is so critical in understanding what those critical employees actually care about. And so walking through the 4 areas, the first one is great leaders. Do people join your organization because they want to work for those leaders, those managers, those senior managers? Or is it the company? What this company is trying to accomplish in its mission. People are proud of that company, and so they want to work for that company. Or is it a great job? Is it complex, rewarding? Is there opportunity for varied responsibilities? Is there growth? And also, is there great rewards? And of course, there's financial and non-financial rewards that are involved with these positions. And so what you can think about is that, of course, not every company is going to be amazing at all 4. And you know what? It doesn't need to be. Remember, we need to create an employee value proposition that attracts that key talent, those key high performers. So once again, how would you rate your current or past organizations? Not on just the employee value proposition entirely, but on each individual element. Are people joining your organization because they say, I really want to work for that one leader? Is it because of the company and for what it stands for? Is it the job? Is it an amazing opportunity? Is it an amazing job? Maybe it's the rewards or the pay. And so your employee value proposition, it needs to be distinctive to differentiate. Just like with your customers, you need to differentiate for your customers. You need to do it for your employees too. It needs to be targeted, and this is critical, which is why the previous step that we just discussed must come first. You need to attract and retain the highest performing employees that actually drive your value and success. And then in the end, of course, it needs to be real, which goes without saying that it must be delivered on. But this needs to be delivered on in both perception and reality. People need to understand that this exists. The marketing needs to be there so that this is communicated. But then in the end, if you don't deliver, it's going to fall to pieces very quickly. So back to these high performers, keeping these complaining people happy. No, just kidding. So retaining these high performers. So high performers by nature tend to be ambitious. And if their ambitions aren't met, they're going to leave. Now, if you think about this, if someone leaves your organization, on average, what's the quality of the employee you're going to attract? Well, average. On average, you get average, which is why it's very important to retain high performers, because on average, you get average. And so you'll notice this below. You'll see satisfaction rates for high performers here on the left. And a handful of people are highly satisfied. Quite a few people are satisfied, but you also have this good chunk that are dissatisfied as well, or just aren't engaged or don't really feel into it. You also see likelihood of high performers leaving. They kind of have their foot out the door. The largest chunk is somewhat likely to leave. Now, they might think their job's okay, maybe, but they kind of have one foot out the door. They're considering these other options. And also, one thing that you'll notice is that not many are very likely to leave. Now, why would that be the case? Now, these are high performers. They're ambitious. They're good at networking. Well, if they're very likely to leave, they're gone. They're not stuck with your company because these are ambitious high performers. If they want to leave, they will leave, which is why very few of them believe that they are very likely to leave. If they fall into that category, they're already on their way out the door. It's too late many times to try and retain these employees. So let's recap. First, getting the right talent is very, very important for your organization. It's becoming increasingly more important over time. Second, you need to determine which roles specifically are critical for your organization to succeed. At that point, you can then create an employee value proposition. Now, this employee value proposition, just like your customer value proposition, except you have it for your employees, and it needs to attract and retain the key talent that you need for success. And finally, deliver on that employee value proposition. And that is how we're going to attract and retain high performers.